If key takeaways from Jack Smith's 45-page indictment sounded familiar, it's because many of those details were already presented to the American public through the January 6th committee. In a series of dramatic hearings, as well as an 800-page report, the committee made the case that Donald Trump was ultimately responsible for the insurrection. Congressman Jamie Raskin, one of its members, hailed the investigation for laying the groundwork for Trump's third indictment, calling it a tremendous vindication. He also firmly rejected Trump's free speech defense to the new charges, a view shared by none other than Trump's former attorney general and chief henchman, Bill Barr.
As the indictment says, they're not attacking his First Amendment right. He can say whatever he wants. He can even lie. But that does not protect you from entering into a conspiracy. All conspiracies involve speech, and all fraud involves speech. So, free speech doesn't give you the right to engage in a fraudulent conspiracy.
Joining me now is Congressman Jamie Raskin, who was the lead manager during Donald Trump's second impeachment and a member of the January 6th Select Committee. And Congressman, you are uniquely disposed, I think, to react to today because you did lead the second impeachment, which was for what Donald Trump did on January 6th. And, of course, you were involved in the January 6th committee. So I just want to get your just sort of basic reaction to the fact that today did indeed happen, this arraignment.
Well, it is a great vindication of the rule of law in American democracy. And I think that in this case, William Barr had it exactly right. There's no First Amendment right to engage in a conspiracy to overthrow an election, to engage in a conspiracy to interfere with the federal proceeding. There's no First Amendment right to engage in a conspiracy to defraud the American people of an honest election or to violate their voting rights. So I think the court, will be able to sort that out, just like common sense tells us that you don't have a free speech right to overthrow the government. In fact, there are more than a half dozen different places in the Constitution itself which explicitly reject insurrection against the government. I mean, Congress has the power to call forth the militias in order to suppress insurrections and repel invasions and enforce the law. That's in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15. But, it's all over the Constitution. In Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it says if you swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and you violate it by engaging in insurrection or rebellion, you can never hold office again. So obviously, we have the right to defend our constitutional process. And that's what this prosecution's all about.
And what do you think of, do you think that there is something sort of poetic about the fact that, a provision of the Ku Klux Klan Act underlies one of the counts against Donald Trump?
Well, and it really does go back to Reconstruction and the Civil War. Lincoln made a beautiful statement where he said that insurrection is an assault on the very first principle of democratic government, which is that the people get to choose their own leaders. And so we had just engaged in a whole presidential election process through the complicated electoral college system. We had arrived at a solution. Joe Biden won by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the electoral college. And then, this mob shows up to say, no, we are going to take this in another direction. And Donald Trump was doing everything in his power to void out the legitimate election results and substitute them with counterfeit electors in a completely fraudulent process. So it was an attempt to perpetrate a fraud on the public, but fundamentally it was an attempt to usurp the will of the people and violate everybody's voting rights, and specifically to void out the votes of everybody who had cast ballots in Michigan, in Arizona, in Georgia, in Wisconsin, the states that they had targeted for getting Mike Pence to just nullify the votes, to step outside of his constitutional role and say, I'm going to return these electors to those states, or just anoint Donald Trump, or kick it into the House of Representatives. I mean, there were different plans afoot, but all of them were attempts to drain the victory away from Joe Biden and overthrow the actual election result.
You mentioned Mike Pence. He chose not to testify, refused to testify, in fact, before the January 6th committee. What did you make of the revelations that came in part from his contemporaneous notes, something we didn't know before the indictment, and the statements he's made thereafter that have been much more open, I think, about what Donald Trump was trying to compel him to do?
Yeah, and I did note that there were several facts that were pled in the indictment relating to Mike Pence that we did not have access to because Pence chose not to testify before a committee. But Donald Trump was clearly trying to coerce him into pulling a switcheroo. I mean, transforming his purely ministerial administrative function at the peaceful transfer of power on January 6th into a substantive role in picking and choosing which electors were going to be admissible, according to him. And Pence, to his credit, said that has never been done. That's not the history of the country. That's not in the Constitution, and it would be utterly lawless. And he was saying that in effect. He issued a memorandum to that effect on January 6th. But of course, Trump didn't care about any of that.
Yeah.
He and his co-conspirators really thought that Pence could come to play the key role in overthrowing the legitimate electoral process. It
was sort of eerie in a sense that the courthouse was so close to the scene of the crime, the scene of the insurrection today, and that is where Donald Trump faced arraignment. But he, as of the last 24 hours, he's still making threats. He has vowed retribution. Soon in 2024, he put on his Truth Social, fake Twitter, it will be our turn. And he is threatening very openly to indeed weaponize the government against the Biden family, against whoever his perceived enemies are, effectively turning the country into a banana republic if he comes back. What do you make of the fact that he is undeterred, even after 3 indictments, the January 6th hearings, civil cases against him? He seems undeterred in terms of threatening to literally weaponize the government against his enemies if he's returned to the White House. And the fact that he's even so viable as a candidate on the Republican side.
Well, you've got it. He's in full-blown autocratic dictatorial mode at this point. He's doing everything in his power to delegitimize the American justice system and the rule of law. For him, it's just about rival party teams or even just those who are loyal to him and those who are not. That is politics characteristic of a banana republic. There are people all across the political spectrum who are rejecting what he's trying to do. But it is a very troubling sign that so many people in the Republican Party continue to follow his irredeemably and incorrigibly corrupt conduct with respect to American constitutional law and our system of government. So that's a serious problem. But we know that the vast majority of the American people are on the side of the Constitution, are on the side of upholding democratic institutions, and are not going to fall for any of that, and do not want to see a form of politics arise in America that's based on vendetta. So he's entitled to the legal presumption of innocence like everybody else in America. He's entitled to due process like everybody else in America. There's a great judge sitting on his case who was a public defender, who's a criminal defense lawyer, who will be very attentive to his rights, and he should have all of his rights. He can make all of his arguments, but fundamentally, the rule of law has got to be vindicated here.
I think we all agree, everyone watching this show agrees that without the January 6th committee, we likely would not be here. There was a great reluctance at the FBI to do what is being done now by Jack Smith, to have this happen. And so we thank you. We thank the January 6th committee for all of your work. Congressman Jamie Raskin, thank you for being here. Much appreciated.
And thank you, Joy.